So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do npx create React app. So this is going to be a create React app. Like I said, we're not building upon the other workshop. So create React dash app, and we're going to just call it timer, I don't know, test or timer styled, whatever you guys want to call it. Again, style npx should come installed with your node. And what npx is really doing, it's just installing your packages without you having to install it. What error did I get? Oh, I have to choose a different name. That's the first time I get this. Cannot create it because of npm restriction.
Oh yeah, I don't think
Capital
it's
letters.
camel case.
Yeah,
That's
it's
true.
more camel case.
Good call. And if I recall correctly, that's because at Mac terminal is case insensitive, right? Or case sensitive, I think it was. Not sure. I always get those quoted up mixed. But yeah, either way, we're gonna go and we're just gonna install create React app. Every time I install create React app, I pretty much just blow everything. And by blow, I mean like I delete every file and kind of just start over, just because we're not really gonna use a lot of things there. Create React app already comes with ESLint configured, all Webpack, all that is already set up. So yeah, obviously this always takes a few seconds here and there, right? Should be getting done right about now. But yeah. So yeah, like I told you, one of the other things that I feel it's very powerful about styled components is that it comes with a theme provider baked in, and it's a very good way to pass certain properties around for us. So all right, once we have that, we're gonna go to timer styled, and we're gonna open that folder. So once we're here, this is what I do. I go to index, I do select all, I just copy that, and then I pretty much just delete everything. And then I go ahead and I create a new index.js file. There, obviously, you don't have to do all that, but so yeah, obviously, index CSS is gone. Service workers is gone too. We don't need this. Cool. And then we need to make app.js. So everyone following up to this moment, let me know again if I'm going, too fast. Feel free to drop it on the chat and whatnot. There we go, chat. Let me have this open. Okay, cool. So now we basically have this, right? Let's go into our app.js and, import React from React. And I'm going to make a quick pause just to show you guys something. You remember that I told you that ESLint already came configured with package.json? So, I mean, with create React app, if you go to a package.json, you'll see the ESLint config is there already. So, and it's just extending what the recommended, what I showed you during the workshop if you were there. And I'm pretty sure that if we go here to our node modules, we're going to find the ESLint somewhere around there. Yeah, it should be somewhere around there. Bin, ESLint, and what I was just trying to get at is that it's already installed and configured for us. Obviously, you can override this, but by making a new ESLint config file. Not necessarily, just letting you know. So now const app. If you recall during the workshop, I rather use the fat arrow expression. Then we're just gonna say return, and just gonna say h1 timer, and then we're just gonna put 0 here, and we're gonna say export default app, and we're gonna save this. So now we're gonna open our consoles, and we're gonna do npm run start. Just make sure everything is working. Boom. So always the first boot takes a little bit. All right, cool. Everything's working. Everything should be working for you. That's awesome. First things first, I forgot to install the package. So I'm just gonna kill the terminal and I'm gonna do npmi, and we're gonna install it as a peer dependency because it's gonna be used in production. Styled components. I've done this so many times, I know it by heart now. Again, we're not gonna use styled components right now. I just wanted to install it before I forget. Then if we notice, if we go here, I'm gonna keep this open. Let me bring this here and just wanted to have access to our HTML, right? So if you see, well, all right, cool, div. Now we're gonna wrap this in a div. I was just in my Windows computer, so like sometimes I forget, like my keys are all messed up and I forget what was what. So we'll just wrap it, no big changes there. Then we're gonna do button, and this button, actually, let's add a piece of state. That piece of state is gonna be called isActive, and set isActive. We're gonna do use state. So where's my autocomplete? Didn't failed me, but we can just go here and we can say, it's good practice, I guess, in bigger code bases to destructure things. Again, that's all preference for your team. So first of all, we're just gonna say, okay, if it's active and set it's active, we'll set it to false. And we're gonna open a parenthesis here. So remember what we said, right? We want to be able to make this start, pause, reset, and record. So first of all, we're gonna use the same button interchangeably. So for pausing and starting it. So we're gonna say, okay, if it's active, we want you to say pause. Else, we want you to call this start, right? Then we're gonna make another button here. And this button, we're just gonna call it reset. And by now, should have, wow, that took a long time to install. My connection must be suck right now. And I have the gigabit, supposedly. Huh. Cool. So we're just gonna say reset, start. In the meantime, as this is loading, cool. Our button shouldn't be doing anything right now. We're gonna create another piece of state. That piece of state is gonna call initial time and set initial time. By the way, whenever you guys do Booleans in state or any Boolean value, call it with a verb. That's something that when you get in a code base or you're contributing to open source, you're gonna get called out on. So like if it's a true or false, you know, in this case, if the timer is active, so you know it's the right way to say it is active, or let's say if you want to put a Boolean, something that returns a Boolean like has times or is toggled or something like that. I hope you catch my drift. Whenever you see Booleans, always try to prepend a verb. This would also be very, very valid, toggle active. Some people do that instead of set is active. So toggle active, set is active, whatever you want to call it. Then we're gonna say use state, and we're just gonna initialize that piece to 0. Now we're gonna replace this 0 that we have here with our initial time, right? So now, obviously, our initial time is 0. Next, we are gonna call a hook called UseEffect. And you know what UseEffect does? It's a lifecycle method. It allows you to incorporate your code at different life cycles within the rendering of that component. That could be before the component renders, while the component is rendering, after the component's rendered, or when some specific data attribute or prop changes, you can mark it basically to listen to that change, right? And that's that little array bracket that you see as a second argument. So we're gonna say use effect. There we go. It auto imported it for me. Now I'm gonna open a callback. We're gonna call it curly braces, and we're gonna set interval to null. Then we're gonna open a conditional if statement, and we're gonna say if is active, we want you to do the following. So if it's active, we want you to grab interval and set it to a JavaScript function called setInterval. SetInterval, or interval, sorry, my pronunciation might not be the best. And we're gonna call another callback within that one. Then we're gonna say setInterval, and we're gonna call setInitialTime inside of this. So we're just gonna call setInitialTime. And if you recall from my workshop, the first thing that we're gonna do, in the setter, we have access to the previous data, right? So we're just gonna we're gonna say prev. So that means the previous data, and fat arrow, and we're gonna say setInitialTime. And well, actually, no, sorry. We're gonna say prev +1. And we're gonna leave it at that. We're just gonna see what this is right now. And I don't know if that should work. Cool, yeah, that shouldn't work. And that shouldn't work because we haven't initialized it. So in the active button, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do an unclick, and we're gonna open the curly braces. In the unclick, we're gonna call callback. And again, we're just gonna set toggle is active. And we're gonna toggle is active to true. This is all we're doing right now, right? So now, when we press start, oh, that went crazy. That was my bad. I forgot to do something. In the interval, we have to let it know, obviously, that it should go up every second. I put it on, no wonder it went crazy on me. So we're gonna do start. So now we should get a 1, 2, 3, and that's going in doubles. And that's a good thing that happened, because now the component is being rendered every single time. We're not controlling it. So there's a re-render going on, being introduced as a side effect. So we need to control that side effect. And that's usually when you see that bracket here. So now we're just gonna be like, all right, gonna go start. Now it should go, oops, not yet. Let's see, we're gonna pass it is active. So we're essentially saying, okay, every time is active changes, we want you to re-render. We want this effect to take place, right? So now should start going. And if you see, this got triggered as well. The pause, it went from start to pause, right? So far, is everyone following? Cool, I'll take that as a yes. Cool, we'll just reset this because we still haven't given it any exit condition. So now we're gonna say, okay, that's if it's active. If it's not active, so we're gonna say else, if it's not active, so, if it's active and the initial time is not 0, that means that it's going, we want you to clear the interval. We're gonna say else if, I'm gonna say is active, and initial time is not equal to 0. We're gonna use clear interval. It's also something that's baked in here. And we're gonna pass it the interval time. And then we're just gonna say return clear interval, and we're just gonna pass it the interval time right there. Now we have another, it's asking us, ESLint, if you can see, our React hook accepted depth. So it's saying, hey, React hook UseEffect is missing a dependency. So again, this is why you want to use React recommended. So we're gonna say, okay, what the next dependency is, sorry, it said initial time. Okay, so we're also gonna subscribe this side effect to initial time. So now we're gonna do start, and it should go 2, 3. Now we got there. So we got this part covered, right? So at this point, I think, let's just do the reset really quickly before we get onto the style components. We're gonna create a function here, and we're gonna call it const handle reset. Everything that's with listeners, I usually like to call it like handle click, handle this, handle that. But So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna say set is, oh, sorry, it was toggle is active, or toggle active, or set is active, whatever you called it, to false, and set the initial time, oops, set initial time back to 0. So now we're gonna go to our button, and our reset button, and we're gonna do onClick, and then we're gonna do, not a fat arrow function. We're just gonna call it handle reset in there. Okay, cool. Now, if I press start, right, should start, and then if I do reset, it should go back to 0, and it should wipe it out, right? So let's just go through start again, pause comes in, and then we say reset. If you see, pause does not have any functionality yet, right? So what we're gonna do now is that you saw that in toggle active, I said basically just set it to true, right? So that means that every time you toggle active, it's just gonna set toggle active to true. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna delete true, and we're gonna say prev, and then you could say prev, let's see, prev plus, here, we're just gonna say we want the opposite of prev. That's simpler. So all I'm doing here is that I'm saying toggle is active, grab what we had in state. So if it was true, false, whatever it was, just set it back to the opposite of that, right? So now this, if we click start, now it's true, right? So if we click it again, it should set it to the opposite of that, right? See, so it paused it, start went back on, reset, we can reset it. Good, we have a timer. At this point, we'll just go back to our styled components, and we'll do the first thing. We're gonna do import styled from styled components. And always the first one I like to do is we're gonna say const container, and we're gonna call this styled, and we're gonna say div. What's going on here? And we're gonna call here. Div is a method inside the styled object. And you guys are probably looking at this and saying, what the hell is going on? I'm gonna show you, if you haven't been introduced to template literals, this is JavaScript syntax. And this is literally what we're doing here is we're grabbing it's an alternate way of calling a function. When you do this, it's pretty much the same as doing this. That's why during the workshop, I was able to extend it. But when you do this, it passes the argument as a string. So a styled component leverages that and does a lot of stuff in the background to be able to parse it and initially put it back. So I'm just gonna show you really quickly what template literals does. You don't have to follow this part. So we're just gonna call function, I don't know, test. We're gonna pass it a string, and we're gonna just say console log string, right? And now we're gonna call test, and we're gonna, test like this, and we're gonna just put, I don't know, color red, and background, I don't know, blue. What I wanna show you though, it's what it's gonna do. This is the return value. It returns an array in a string, which essentially could be parsed, right? So by doing that, style components leverages this syntax to be able to, that gives you the ability to be able to grab regular CSS syntax and introduce it into your actual CSS, right? So that's what I really like about style components in comparison to other libraries. I feel that's very powerful. So by us doing div here, now we have container. Let's replace the first div that we have. And we're gonna call this container. Nothing happens, it's still just a div. If we go to our console, it's a div, right? I don't know if you guys can see this. It's still a div, right? But it has an automatic class, auto generator, right? So this is what I was telling you about. You don't have to worry about naming stuff, right? So it's pretty cool. It's really powerful in my opinion. I really like it. It's a productivity booster. Now let's say we're gonna call this container, and we're gonna put a border around it of 1px solid red, right? And now we have a border container around our whole thing, right? As simple as that. Literally from here on, from the point you put the template literals, all you have to worry about is regular CSS. Same CSS rules, same CSS everything. You don't have to do any more setup, any more anything, right? So let's say what I was telling you about the props. Let's do the timer. Let's call it timer, and we're gonna call this const, and we're gonna say title. Then we're gonna do styled dot. Now we're gonna access any HTML tag that is valid is gonna exist here. We're gonna do h1, and we're gonna say color gray. As you see, nothing out of the ordinary besides the syntax. Now we're gonna replace the h1 and we're gonna call it title, right? And it's changed to gray, right? Now let's do the buttons. We're gonna do const button, and we're gonna do styled, and we're gonna say button. Simple. Nothing out of the ordinary up to this point. And there will be nothing out of the ordinary, trust me. The hardest thing to explain to you was the template literal doing. That's literally the craziest part about this whole thing, right? And I don't know, let's do color. We'll leave it undefined right now. We're gonna pass some props in there. So we're just gonna have that, and our buttons, let's just get our buttons and replace it by button. If you've noticed this awfully, look at your JavaScript now, in my opinion, it looks cleaner. It looks components, you know. The cool thing about this tool is that instead of going to a whole nother file, if you just want to peek into this file, you can just control or command click it, and you can edit it from here. And if you have it in another file, you can do that same here, same as CSS, right? The reason why we have two buttons is obviously because we're gonna have the reset button. In general, in UX practices, when it's a danger, you wanna put it in color red or something like that, right? You wanna tell the user, hey, whatever you're doing here is a dangerous action, cancel, delete, right? Things like that, that's good UX practice. There's also like primary buttons like submit, success, right? There's colors for everything, and the color schemes are really important. So now what we're gonna say, it's gonna say, we're gonna put here success. And we're gonna say here danger, right? We're just passing two props. We haven't done anything out of the ordinary. So button, we added danger, and the other button, we added success, right? We're gonna go back up to our code. And now inside here, we're gonna say background color. And other awesome thing, if you have the extensions installed, you get the autocomplete, which is dope, in my opinion. I get really excited. I love styled components. I've met the author. The guy is a genius. Background color, and we're gonna say, remember we were in JavaScript, right? And you remember how do you interpolate while you're in JavaScript, right? You pass the $sign with the curly braces, right? So again, because we're inside a string, right? Just remember we're inside a string, but inside the string that you can interpolate on, right? So we're gonna say props, because we have props. You can call this whatever you want. And we're gonna pass the fat arrow function. And we're gonna say here, if props dot success, I would say, yeah, prop dot success, color green, else color red. So we'll see. Nice. See, and we use the same thing for two buttons. For two different elements, we use the same properties. So in general, if you were doing CSS, you would need to write another CSS class and put this class and put it conditional. So you would say, okay, add this class. If not, add this other class. Forget that. For me, and this is for me, does not work for everyone, right? Again, opinions are my own. This is more of a productivity booster. And it also playing with things like this gets your JavaScript skills up, because you start doing conditionals and funny things in there, and you can add whatever I said is valid JavaScript syntax is good play here. Let's say we want to destructure this. We can delete that and say success. Oops, my bad. And oh, that's valid JavaScript syntax. That works. Then we could say here, okay, if it's success, green, else if, let's say else if danger, we could say red, else no. Oops. I mean, and this is obviously, I probably wouldn't write that same line of code, but it's to show you, right, that, so what would happen here? What would happen here is that if we added another button, so we're gonna add another button, that's gonna call button, and this is gonna be record. And there, no styles have been applied to that button because it doesn't meet any of this criteria, right? But let's say we wanna just make it, I don't know, success. We just pass a prop to it, and that's it. It becomes like that. Awesome, right? Simple, cool JavaScript. I don't know. I tend to geek out of these things. I really like it. I think it's very powerful. I just keep reiterating that. So let's do something. Let's make this, let's add the theme provider, right? For the theme provider, we're just gonna go, this is a pattern I like to follow. You don't need to follow it. I usually create a new folder. Let's say components. This would be where my components are. And we'll just put it inside that folder. We'll call it theme.jsx, a file, right? Now we're gonna do import React, import React from React. And then we're gonna say import, open curly braces, say theme in uppercase, like that, provider. So check the casing, make sure you're following that right. And we're gonna say from styled components. Cool. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna say const theme, and we're gonna make it a function which takes children, the structured. Have you guys seen this syntax, like children and all that? Like, what we're gonna do is probably a little bit of render props. So what we're gonna say here, oops, is return theme provider, and then open curly braces, and we're gonna pass children. Essentially, what this syntax is saying is, all right, whatever theme provider is a child of theme provider gets access to theme provider. This very same way context does it. Then we're gonna say export default theme, right? We're also gonna, at the top of the file, we're gonna say const theme, just lowercase, and open an object. Next to provider, we're gonna pass an attribute, and we're gonna call this attribute, and we're just a theme, and we're just gonna pass it theme. Essentially, I'm just building up to the point where we're gonna go. Now let's go back to our index.js. We're gonna import theme from components theme. Then we're just gonna wrap app on it. Sorry, my hotkeys. And still works, right? Cool. Let's add something to that theme JSX, right? Let's add something to that object. So first things first, I'm just gonna add one really quick. We're just gonna add an object here. And we are gonna open this curly braces for theme. And let's say we're gonna call this dark gray. And it's a string because it's an object. Put it in the chat. This is the color code I'm using. So what's gonna happen now? We're gonna go back to our app, and inside this color right here, we're gonna delete gray. Now we're gonna open the $, and we're gonna interpolate. And we're gonna say props. Props. Then we're gonna pass a fat arrow. Then we're gonna say props.theme dot dark gray, was it that we called it? Let me just make sure that that's what we called it, dark gray. And then I'm gonna hit save. And the color changed. So what's going on here? Because we have access to props and theme provider is using context, we essentially could put all our main styles, like our colors, our font sizes, all that in the theme object. And then since the theme object, everything, so if you recall, we said everything that is a child of theme provider. So that's what children is here. This is the equivalent of doing props and saying props.children. So that's, and when you say children, what that is the structure, and it's essentially everything that is under or between the themes is a children of theme. Thus, anything where props.theme gets called gets access to the theme provider. You're following until now?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Okay.
gotcha.
Cool. So exactly. So now we have theme dark gray, right? And you can start doing a bunch of different stuff with this, right? I'm just trying to get you to see like the basic functionality of theme provider, right? So let's say I'm gonna add another color here, and we're gonna call this darker gray. So I have a little imagination, and let me just, I'm actually just gonna copy this whole object and paste it to you guys in the chat. We're over the time. I had said 30 minutes. Again, I'm gonna record this. I'm just gonna go ahead and finish what I was doing right now. Just my train of thought so you guys can see it. Feel free to drop. You'll still get the recording though. I gotta get better with my time estimates, definitely. But yeah, so theme provider now, we're going to go, thank you, Kayla. It's also super fun for me to be here. So let's say in container. Now let's delete this line in border. Open the parentheses again. Open the curly braces with the dollar, because we're gonna interpolate. And we're gonna say props, but this time we're gonna destructure immediately. So I'm gonna open parentheses. I'm gonna open curly braces inside, and I know that the object that I'm looking for inside props is called theme. So I can just say theme, but you could also destructure it again. I'm not gonna confuse you, hold on. We're just gonna say theme, and we could say, again, one px, again, because we're within curly braces, we've created a new JavaScript instance pretty much, right? So we have to open the curly braces again, I mean the template literals, and we're just gonna say 1px, or let's call this 3 pixels solid, and let's open curly braces again, interpolate, and we're gonna say theme dark or darker gray, right? So, oops, all right, cool. So we're gonna do command save, and there we go. So now we have access to this wherever we want. If we want to create another component, as long as that component is inside of app or inside the theme component or the theme provider, it's fair game. We have access to it anywhere. So a lot where this is really powerful is, look, when you guys get to your first job, you're gonna work with probably a good UX UI designer. They're gonna usually style systems or like what's it called? Design systems, which is what the UX use, the UI use. They will give you a set of colors and a set of font sizes and a set of pixels for spacing. Some use the 4 pixel grid, other use the 8 pixel grid, other use the 12-point grid. But all those things, if you have it inside your props, you don't have to be even thinking about it. You just say, I'm just gonna pull it from the themes object, right? That's, in my opinion, that's super powerful. Let's say this record button, let's just add the recorder. And we're gonna select all of the buttons, so line 46 in this case, and I'm gonna wrap it around curly braces. I'm gonna open a space, and I'm gonna say if, I'm gonna put a conditional. So we're gonna say has times, or no, actually, wait. We're gonna say is active. So yeah, if it's active, so if it's true, and if initial time is not 0. So essentially what we're saying in this conditional, okay, if it's active, so if it's running and the time is not 0, meaning it's running, we want you to show the record button. Else, just return no. Reason when you do conditionals like this, if you're not going to return anything, just return null, because null, it won't create a new HTML element. So we're going to hit save, and good, it's out of there, right? And if you see, if we scroll down, its record is not in our HTML, right? But if we hit start, now record is in our HTML, right? So it's not there. So this is, why is this important? This is important because the way, how React updates or how it understands and re-renders updates is that it uses something called reconciliation. So DOM reconciliation, what it does is, just imagine we have this HTML tree here, right? So React creates a virtual DOM and it'll analyze changes between those two DOMs. So it'll go and it'll say, okay, button, is there a change in button in the comparison? It has one change? No? Okay, cool. We're gonna go up to the next component. Has something changed here? Until it detects a change, then it'll say, okay, cool, I'll update this piece right here. It'll delete it and it'll re-render that. So what happens, just think in scalability. If you have a huge app, a lot of HTML elements, you're just giving the React engine more time to work, right? Because now it has to go through more components. So this is relevant. Adding null and just not returning anything if you don't want there is relevant because in a way you can think about it, you're doing small tiny changes to improve performance in your React application, right? You're just giving, again, you're just giving less elements for your React to read through, right? That's the way I see it. I think that's a very valid way. So yeah, we're there. We're started. It's going. We can pause it. We can restart it. We can reset, right? So this is saying, okay, cool. Up until there, we're good. I think this is good enough of an intro of styled components. I want to know if you guys have any questions.
Pretty good. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep, loud and clear, bro.
Yeah, perfect. So honestly, I love like I can see how this could be good for scalability. It kind of reminds me of Redux a little bit, and the fact that it has the global props. But in the back of my head, I can't help but think that this seems like a little bit too much compared to Sass. So I wonder if there's like more like to it performance wise or anything like that, because why not just change the class name with JSX? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's perfectly valid. You can do that, like I said. Again, for me, it's preference, right? But the reason why I don't like class names, me personally, is because I tend to run into bugs with them. And not bugs that they create, they're perfectly fine. Bugs that I create myself, because it's hard to keep track of all those class names. As your code base grows, it's just harder to keep track of that. And then what happens if you, for example, ESLint won't detect if you, let's say, if the class name is button, but you only put BT by accident, you won't know that until you get to production, right? Whereas the component, it just won't render in this case, right? Or it'll break, it'll give you a warning. It won't even compile because it'll say this is undefined, right? There's basically, this doesn't exist. If the component is named button and you just put BUTTO, if nothing is defined, it'll just fail. So I think that's one point for me where it comes to class names. Again, you could do the same thing. For me, it just comes to the traceability and keeping track of all those class names. That's why in that case, I like that over classes.
Right, thank you. So it's more like how TypeScript, it's a little bit of an extra step, but it's like, hey, at least it helps you catch the bugs easier. So yeah, is that a good way to see it? Or like just?
I mean, is bugs? Yeah, I mean, there's obvious bugs that are gonna. There's some bugs. Let me rephrase that. There's some bugs that are just gonna be more obvious when you're dealing with styled components and versus CSS, right? By the way, the theme provider, you don't need to include it. I just did that to show you guys the theme provider. Yeah, in that sense, also what I really like class names versus this is that if, let's say, to do the same thing we did here, we would have had to make 3 classes. One that's called success, one that's called button, danger, and one that's just nothing, right? So then we would have 3 separate classes, and then we have to keep track with state which class gets called where and this, versus in this case, we can just pull in one component and just pass it an attribute and make that component more reusable, right? So that's where the real power, I think, comes for me. I hope that made sense.
Right, thank you.
So yeah, for me, it's a lot about reusability. Definitely style components will give you a little bit more reusability in general than class names, I think. Cool. I think we actually can leave it at there. Unless you guys want to do a little bit more of just ask me anything and I'll do it. But we pretty much did what we wanted to. We can finish the recorder, the list. I mean, we could just add recording, or you could just build on top of it and add styles and do whatever you want and add it to your GitHub. It's up to you guys. I'm free for the next half hour.
So can you say one more time, what's the extension that you're using for VS Code for the style components?
It's called style components. If you go to VS Code, it's extensions. Oh, I thought I did at least. Wait, let me see. CSS. Maybe I thought I did. Maybe I didn't. I don't have it installed. Maybe I don't need it. Yeah, I think it already comes baked in, because I don't seem to have anything installed. Install components, unless, let me see, maybe I'm looking at the wrong place. Show installed extensions, styled.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, there we go. We do. I did have one.
I was gonna say,
yeah.
but okay.
Yeah. And what this will give you, it'll just give you a lot of like IntelliSense and stuff baked in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, just for those, if you wanted to continue, we'll just add the list, or how I would go about adding a list of the times that were recorded. By the way, these are terrible colors. Like I said, I didn't think this through. I didn't like go over like the style design system or anything, or trying to look at pretty. I just kind of wanted to show you what you could do. Another good thing, right? Let's say that, I don't know, I'm just gonna write something here really quickly. Let's say we call this div and hello, and you have a class name here, right? And this class name is called hello. So this is a child of container. So you could go here, press enter, say dot hello, open curly braces, and say color Rebecca purple. Yeah, like that color. And there it goes. It changed colors. That doesn't, let me see, red. Let's just change it to red. Right. So you can still nest classes in there. It's perfectly valid. You could still use both. Like, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from using class names and using or not, right? So you can still nest this. If you had other things, if you want to override other components, let's say you don't want to call you don't want to make every component a style component. So, right, let's say we're just going to change this back to an H1. And we're going to go inside container. And we're going to grab this. And we're just going to say H1. Hi, H1. You could put that there. And it still works. You don't need to make every single component a style component. I failed to explain that at the beginning, but you could just make container and just nest all of them inside of them. That's perfectly valid as well. So let's see. I'm just gonna go ahead here and add. Here, we're gonna say piece of state, and we're gonna call this const. And we're gonna say times. We're gonna call this set times. And we're gonna use state, and then we're gonna set this state to an empty array. I'm just gonna initialize it to an empty array. And now we're gonna go here and let's make a function. We're gonna call this function constant, and we're gonna say handle record. And we're gonna say set times. Again, we're gonna grab our previous data, just in case we have anything there. And we're gonna say, we're gonna open another bracket, And we're going to say, all right, if you had anything there, we're going to spread it out. So that means we're creating a new copy of state and setting that new copy to state. And then we want you the initial time, which is the time that was at that moment, right? Paused there. So again, what we're saying here, we're just spreading what we already had in state. If there's nothing, nothing's going to get spread out. If there is something, we're going to keep, wait. You could achieve the same thing by doing push, right? I'm just trying to introduce you to other patterns that you could use with hooks, right? So now we're saying, okay, we're going to create another conditional here. So we're going to open curly braces, and we're going to say, if times dot length is greater than 0, meaning that there is something in the array, we're going to say a conditional, open parentheses. We want you to display an unordered list, and we'll just put a list item inside for right now, and we'll call that 1. Else, return null. So again, what we're doing here, we're just saying, okay, if the times array, that piece of state that we created up there, has something in it, meaning has a length of greater than 0, return UL. Else, return nothing. So if I save this, nothing should come there, right? However, if I go here, do the piece of state, and I add 1, we should see 1, right? Cool. So now we're not showing anything. We're going to delete this line that we created here. And because times is an array, we're going to say times dot map. Then we're going to open parentheses. We're going to put time, fat arrow function, and then we're going to say li, and then we're just going to pass the time. What is going here? Times not defined.
Return it, right?
The time?
Oh, no. So this is what's going on. Because again, we were using VS Code, right? We needed to wrap that whole thing because we're using JavaScript to render more JavaScript HTML elements, right? So also one of the reasons why I want to show you this is that you could essentially nest a lot of JavaScript within JavaScript, right? So now if we have start, we'll hit start. Boom, boom, boom. We should hit pause. So that, I don't, give me once. We're gonna toggle this right here. So we're saying if it's active. So let me see. I think if we add additional here. So, okay, if it's false and it's running, that means that if it's not active, but it's running, we're gonna still have the record button, right? So if we hit record, whoa, I didn't pass it. Where am I today? So in the reset button, I called it handle reset, that's why. We should put handle record. So again, if I do start, if I do pause, if I do record, okay, what's going on here? Oh, my bad. I am really all over the place today. It's been a long day. All right, and we're gonna put handle record. By the way, if you've noticed, I don't worry about formatting while I'm writing. I just write whatever, and then I just do command save, and ESLint and Prettier takes care of the rest. If that is not a productivity booster, I don't know what is. So now,
handle line 53 reverted back to handle reset.
Oh yeah, that was on purpose. That's because I had it on the wrong. That was supposed to be handle reset. This was the button that needed to be added. All right. So now if we press record, cool. We can add things to our list, right? So what is it doing, right? So we're essentially saying, okay, if it's not active, so if we're in the pause state and the initial time is not 0, meaning that it started at one point, it's not 0 anymore, we want you to render the record button. That's why if we do reset, the record button's done, right? Then we're creating another thing here and we're saying, if times does not have a length of 0, meaning that there is a time recorded in the times array, we want you to display the unordered list with the times that have been recorded, right? So yeah, so we could do start. We could do pause. We could do record the first time. No, we could do start again. We should do pause. We could do record, and it gets added, right? And then you can just play with it as you want. You can order it, sort it, whenever, right? And let's say that this unordered list, right? And you know what? Let's not even make it a styled component, just to show you that it doesn't need to be a styled component. We're just gonna put, so we're gonna say, but here's the thing. Any unordered list that exists in container, under container, this rule is gonna apply to, right? So that's why you might wanna make maybe separate ones or not. So, or just pass the conditional. We're gonna call the list statement, and we're gonna say that the color is gonna be, okay, so we're just gonna open again, and we're gonna say props. I'm gonna say is a props.color. I mean, if props.time is, so if it's, oh my God, what was it to see if it's divisible by 2, right? So if the prop time divided by 2 is equal to 0, I think. I'm not even sure. I don't remember. I haven't done odd evens in a while. So if not, just call it blue. And I'm using red and green colors just to really highlight things, right? Cool. So this means that the first one, if we pause it, should be blue because it's odd. If it, guess my thing was not on point there.
Shouldn't it be a module sign?
No, it should be the module sign, yes. But the other error I did was that I had called this color. But thank you very much for that call out. That was amazing. Yes, it's a module sign. Clearly, you've done the Fizz bus test not too long ago. So record. Oops. Let's see what console.log time. By the way, this is very handy when props. My bad. I haven't even. So what I was going to show you here is that in a fat arrow function, you could use, if you want to see what the value is of your argument, you could do console log props and then say or before what you want to render. And the reason this works is because this will, when JavaScript in the browser reads it, it will evaluate to undefined. So if you know a or statement, if the left side is false, it'll go to the second side to evaluate the second side, right? It's not like the and where both sides have to be true. In an or statement, one could be false and the other one could be true, right? So the reason why I want to show you this is that we do prop.time, right? It'll say it's undefined, right? And the reason that it's undefined is because we actually never passed it anything here. So we're just gonna say time equals time. And now it's still undefined, but we're gonna say pause, chord. Okay, that's an error we'll address in a second. Okay, props.time. So what's going on here? So we have time. Oh, it's because this is not a styled component. So my bad. We actually do need to create a styled component for this. So because we're passing the attributes, we could pass the attribute a different way. We could say container, and we could say time, and we could pass the initial value to the container, and not initial time, sorry. I think this should work. So yeah, see, 0. So now it's 0. And the reason why it's happening is because I was trying to pass time to an HTML element, and this is not mapping it to anything, right? Unless we would have called it a styled component. So now this should be able to say, okay, so if we start here and we pause, cool. Okay, it changed it to red. We can play and toggle that around, but what I wanted to show you though first is that okay, that the initial value, like you can toggle that and change colors, but we still gotta address the comment that whether it's even or not even. So the reason that that's happening is because we're calling directly initial time, right? But we don't need, this time we're not referencing initial time. So that's why in this case, I think it's better to actually create our own styled component. So what I'm gonna do here is that I'm just gonna grab, I'm just gonna go to the list item, I'm gonna cut it out, and I'm just gonna create a new constant. And I'm just gonna create this called list, and we're gonna call this styled.li, open the strings, and then just paste this in there. And then we're gonna go to our li down here, and we're just gonna call it list. And then we're gonna say, oops, we're gonna say time is equal to time. And okay, so props.time. Now if we say restart, let's say record. Okay, 1. So if we say start again, and I do this, 2. There we go. Cool. See, so now if we say start again, and we pause it again, we should say record, and it's gonna be, and then let's do it again one more time, and it's gonna be even, right? So what I'm trying to get at here is that the power behind all the things that you could do with just very simple little tweaks, right? If this were like class names, you'd have to do a little bit more. Especially with class names, it's like you have to do the conditional on the class name, right? Which brings for my a bunch of other buckload of problems. But yeah, I think we can stop at that.